Let's talk about the Vector Art Color Studies exercise. As an overview, in this exercise, you will begin to explore working with color in Adobe Illustrator. Again, you will continue to hone your file management and organizational skills. Your task: you will create a single Illustrator document which has 10 artboards for this assignment. Basically, you are going to create a very similar document as the vector art studies exercise. Now, in this assignment, you will create various color harmony groups. Each group will be saved to your Documents Color Swatches panel. Each group will represent the color used in a logo color exploration. Do not mix colors from multiple groups into a single logo color exploration. All right, so if we scroll down a little bit here on the page, you'll see a basic example of the layout template, which we will go over in more detail in an upcoming step. You will also note I have listed the specifications, and right here it says link to video, video still in production. That's what's happening right now. I'm making the video for this exercise. All right, so the color study step. Here's the setup specifications. When you are done, you are going to turn in a folder on the student folder, I should say on the Rogue server in your student folder. That folder will be labeled Color Studies. Again, this Color Studies folder will go inside your student folder. The name of your Illustrator file will be your last name hyphen color hyphen study.ai. And when you are done, your last step will be turning in the Illustrator file by submitting to the exercise in Canvas. For the color studies, our document will be set up for the most part exactly the same as the vector art studies. So you will be working in pixels. You will have a width of 400 by 400. Again, you will have 10 artboards. Your color mode will be RGB. Raster effects will be high, and the preview mode will be in default. You will name your file with your last name hyphen color hyphen study.ai, and your artboards will remain in the same 5-column, 2-row, 10 total artboard layout. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at your document option settings. They will remain the same as the previous exercise also. Now, once you have created your initial document, I want you to open your layers and your artboards. You will again have 10 layers. You will name the layers with a naming convention which makes sense for what it is we are doing. I went with color-study-1, and I should mention that we'll go through 10 layers, and then artboards are artboard 1 through 10. You can rename the artboards if you want. All right. Now, your first or your initial black and white vector art logo will be placed on layer 1 and artboard 1. And I want you to scale your vector art approximately like what you see in this example. And now, it doesn't have to be exactly where I have mine. What I'm suggesting is you leave enough room because there are going to be some other elements which you have to incorporate into each artboard. And we'll go over those in an upcoming step. Okay, so make sure that you leave yourself some space for some other elements. Now, where you place your artwork is up to you, but I suggest you are consistent from artboard to artboard with the position and the relative scale. I want you to open and keep open the following windows. So let's go up to our window menu, and we are first going to get color. And I'm just going to position color right here. And we are going to be working in RGB color. Okay, so you're going to need to make sure from your mode that you are in RGB color. Now, I don't have a color selected, so it's not showing here. All right. Now, I also just want you to verify, excuse me, in your, maybe it's file, and in your document color mode that you are in RGB color for this exercise. And it's probably not a bad idea just to verify in your color settings that you are working with RGB, sRGB working space. So we're going to click OK. We're going to go back over to Edit. You could always check Assign Profile. And again, we're just going to verify that we are working in sRGB. Okay, so let's go ahead and click OK. And I'm going to point out next we have the color guide, and we'll talk about these windows, these panels, more in an upcoming step. I also want you to go to Window, and we need to open our swatches, and you can just position your swatch panel. And again, you can set up where your panels are, however work best for you. And I'm also going to point out that I'm in the Essentials workspace for this demo. All right, so you will have layers, artboards, color, color guide, and swatches windows and panels available. Let's begin with the color panel, and let's just do a brief overview. So I have an element of my logo selected, and you will see that we have first the default fill and stroke. So clicking these chips will always set our fill and stroke back to the defaults. We can also switch between the fill and the stroke. You also have chips which allow you to affect your fill and your stroke, again with these defaults. Now you'll notice that we have red, green, and blue sliders. We are in the red, green, blue color space. So we are dealing with refracted light, which is the color mode for our screen, for our computer monitor. Okay, now what we call these, red, green, and blue, are RGB triplets, because the value of red, green, or blue can be between 0, which is black, and 255, which is white. So if I bring all of these up to 255, we get white. If I go back to my defaults, okay, and we can reverse our defaults. I can select one of the defaults and nullify that feature, okay? So now, if I go back to my fill, I will see 35, 31, 32, And this is what we would call a rich black, which means we have basically some red, some green, and some blue inside, which just richens up the black. If we wanted absolute black, we would have to zero out our sliders. Now note, as I move the sliders, we also get out of web color warning, and we also get a gamut warning. And simply by clicking, we will get these to correct themselves. So if I go with a true black, everything should be fine. Okay. Now I'm also going to point out right here, this is our web formula for color. This is called hexidecimals. More appropriately, we would say bihexadecimal. Now, if I move the red slider, do you see the first two numbers and letters change? These are referred to as alpha numerics. So we have combinations of 0 to 9 and A through F, which represent color, red, green, or blue color. So if I wanted a gray, I could type in 333333, okay? And I would have 33 red, 33 green, 33 blue. And you will see that our hexadecimal is 21, 21, 21. So this is web color, how we deal with color for red, green, and blue when we are dealing with web-based content. RGB is just screen-based content. So hexadecimals when we are dealing with color, let's say for a web page. And then red, green, blue when we are dealing with color, which we're going to view on a screen. All right, now we also can simply click on a color in the spectrum, and whichever stroke or fill is selected, the color will go in. So if I select the stroke, okay, now it's difficult to see because I only have one on the stroke. So if I up the stroke, then you will be able to see the color. The color guide, this is really cool because basically whichever color or hue you have selected, you will basically see variations on the color and then the associated colors of a group. Now in this case we have black selected, and by default here we are looking at shades and tints in the color guide. And right here in the center, these are our active colors. This is the one that I'm working with right now, which is selected. And then we have the various shades and the various tints which are available, which are all mathematically correct. Now, let's first go up to our options and let's look at the color guide options. And right now the steps are 4. So basically from our start point, we go 4 steps one way, 4 steps the other way. And you can increase the amount of steps depending on how many variations you want. I'm going to go back to 4. You can also change the amount of the variation. So the more steps, you might want less variation. Lesser steps, you might want more variation. It really depends on what you're looking for. But you have a lot of control on how many steps and the variation between the steps. Let's click OK. Now, from our options, you can also show warm, cool. You can show vivid, muted. You can also edit colors, save color as swatches, and get at the color guide options. And I'm going to point out those features are available across the bottom also. Now, again, I mentioned we started out by default with shades and tints. Now, depending on who used your software last, this may be different. So let me just point out that you can get into your harmony rules. And right here is shades. So if I were to select, let's say, complementary, so now we're dealing with complementary, and you know from your color theory classes, complementary are across one another, exactly across from one another on the color wheel. So if you just kind of go back and think about your color theory lessons in other art classes, then you'll have a very good understanding of what is going on here. Now I'm going to go back to shades, and now what I want to also show you is you can go to color libraries and you can explore these on your own, but basically you can load different color libraries which are available to you into the color guide, and you can always modify those. Let's now talk about saving colors as swatches and colors as groups. So first, I have my artwork selected, so any changes I make in the color guide, or clicking on swatches will automatically happen to whatever's selected, so be aware of that. Okay, so I'm going to go with, I'll just go with high contrast 1. And I now will see my shades and tints of high contrast. And I can quickly change the color of my logo. So let's say this is my active color, okay? Now, if I want this group of color, all right, to be saved to my swatches, which is a task that you will need to do for each of your color explorations, then we can just click Save Color Group to Swatch Panel. You can also save colors as swatches. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and save color group to Swatch Panel. And my group has showed up over here with this single color. Okay, so what we can do is now name our colors. So if we double click, we will see the recolor artwork. This is color group 1. So I'm just going to double click, and let's call this logo 1. All right. So now what we can do is we can continue to modify this color, okay, by simply dragging the slider around, and that will change the color in our color group also. So let's go ahead and click OK, and I'll save the changes. Okay, so let's now go with a split complementary. All right, and I'm just going to, I can click on these different color chips, and I can select a range of colors, or in this case, shades and tints. And we could save this as a color group. So you can work with groups with very limited amount of color, or you can work with groups with a lot of color inside. That's really up to you. All right, I'm going to double click on the folder, and let's say we call this logo 2. And I was pretty sure I called this one logo. I might not have committed to that. So let's just go logo.
Oh, I did. Sorry, my bad. I messed that one up pretty badly.
This is our gray. I'll just put this back to gray. And this is logo 2. And then I'll go ahead and click OK and yes. And we will have yet another group inside. And again, anytime you have your artwork selected, just clicking on the chips will change the color with whatever artwork is selected. So it makes it really quick. All right, so I have the border selected, so I want to make sure I have border. And then I can click on one of the swatches in the group. Now if I want to deal with the background, I can add in my background. So I believe my artwork was the same color, so let's go ahead and do the fill, and we can bring that color forward. So you can see it's very quick to explore color by creating color groups and then just selecting artwork and clicking on different swatches within the group. Let's take a look at editing colors. So I'm going to make sure I do not have any artwork selected, and I'm just going to select a range of shades and tints here. You can select whatever color chips you like, and we're going to click on Edit Colors. Now, we briefly have seen this panel previously, and that's when I was renaming color groups. Okay, so now we're going to use this panel to actually edit our colors. And what we can do is first view in gradients, if you will, or we can segment up the color, and we can also work with color bars. Now, I'm going to stay with the gradient, but let's just say you might want to explore also with randomly changing colors. And then you have the ability to link and unlink the colors and how they move and adjust, or how you work with them. So I'm going to go back, and now I have my main color here selected. This is my active color. So if I change my active color, the other associated colors or hues change. And this is a really quick way to explore different colors. And then this one here is a web color warning, so we'll just click that to make sure it's correct. We can adjust our saturation. We can also look at this as far as saturation, or I believe on brightness on the color wheel also. So I'm going to stay with the saturation. And then basically you can just click and move your colors around to get different color combinations very, very quickly. Okay, so let's say I want this one here, and I'm going to go ahead and delete it. So I have it selected. I'll get the delete or remove tool, and I should be able to delete. Okay, and the same is true if you wanted to add. So let's just say we wanted to add a color. Okay, so we can easily do that. And of course, you can always go up and choose a different color harmony and begin your edits. So you can actually use the edit colors as a means to create colors. And what's nice is once you are in what is a correct color harmony, or any of the color harmonies, the colors are mathematically adjusted. So the only time you might run, what's the word I'm looking for, astray, is if you unlink and then you just start moving stuff around. And you just kind of go for a freeform approach here. But still, it's good exploration, and it's fun to explore these different colors and create these color groups. So let's say you like this. And what we can do is just click New Color Group. And I'll click the correct one this time. And let's call this one logo 3. And then we can go ahead and click OK, yes, and then logo 3 will now be added. So it's as fast as selecting artwork, and again, changing colors. Now that's awful, but you get the idea. Well, it's awful to me. It might not be awful to someone else. Someone else might think it's really cool. For me, it's a little on the bright side. But it's more demonstrating the fact that we can quickly select colors from our different color groups. Let's now explore the swatch panel. So we can change our view. You also have options for creating new swatches, duplicating. I would also point out that we can save swatches as an SAE file, which we use in other documents, other programs. And we can also save a swatch library as an AI file. So you can use your libraries in other projects. Now, let's just start going across the bottom. Obviously, we can delete a swatch. We can create a new swatch from whatever is currently selected. You can also, so let's say we want to add this to our library, which we have our library right up here. So this is my library. I could create a new library. Let's just say my library. And we click OK. And now our color chip is over here. Okay. So let's go back to our properties. And now we can create a new color group and then begin to add colors. We can get at the swatch options where we can adjust an individual color and again add it. Then we have the show swatch kinds menu, and you can show color swatches, show color groups. I'll go back to show all. So we can limit or delimit, I should say, what we're looking at in our swatches. Then we can add selected swatches and color groups to your current library. So if we selected this entire group, we now added this group to our library. And then we can also again get at all of the different swatch libraries, if you will, and load them as groups into our swatches. And then there's this feature right here. This will open the color themes panel, and there's tools like this available to you on, there's websites that have tools like this available to you also. But basically you can create color groups, if you will. Okay, so we can click to set which one is active. We can add these to our swatches. We can add different color rules. And then again, you can, or I shouldn't say again, but then we can adjust our saturation. We could also do this with sliders instead of the color wheel. Let's say you liked this particular color group that you've just explored, so that we can go to My Themes, or actually, sorry, let's go back to Create, and My Color Theme. So let's just call this Test Color, and we can save this. We can save this to My Library 2. Let's see. Yeah, we'll do, I think it's my default is Library 2, so we'll save it. Okay, and it should show up over here. We also can explore, and we can explore by most popular, by appreciations, published themes, most used, just randomize this. You can do this by time. And basically you can see all of these different created color themes which you might use as start points, and you could save them to your library. You can also load your themes inside. Okay. All right, so color themes. I believe we have covered, for the most part, the swatches panel. Let's talk about gradients. We can get at the gradient window or panel in the window menu, gradient, and you can choose to hide or show your options. You can get at gradients by double-clicking on the gradient tool. Now, to add a gradient, it's as straightforward as selecting the element you would like to add a gradient to. Do you want to add a gradient to the border, the stroke, or the fill? So if we were to select the stroke, and then we will select the type of gradient, linear, radial, and there's a new freeform gradient. So let's just say we try linear. And it goes to the default gray, okay, black and white. And you'll notice that the list is very short because there are not many gradient swatches that are default to the document. You have to create your own. Okay, so let's just say we did not want black. So right now we are going from white to black, and then this is our midpoint on the ramp. And you can see how you can change the curve of that ramp. And we can even do something like this. Okay, so we can redistribute or change how quickly we go from one color to another color. So let's say we want to change. So I can double click, and it's kind of gone off the screen here a little bit. So let me move this up. Double click, and you can choose a color of your choice. Okay. You can also use your swatches, which is exactly what you should be doing. Okay, make sure you stay in the same color group. Okay, so gradients, we can add them to stroke, we can add them to the fill, you can edit the gradient, you can choose the type of gradient. You can quickly add more colors by just clicking right underneath, and you can move these around. Again, you can double click and add colors. All right. If you choose or decide you don't want one of the colors, you should be able to, they've slightly changed it. You used to be able to drag them right up. Now you just select and hit the trash can. Okay, so let's say I want to go back. So I'm going to select in my swatches the stroke, and I'll go back and just add a solid color. So now with our object or element selected, actually it's an object, let's now make sure we select the fill, and we can add our gradient. Now we can also live edit, and that is done with the gradient tool. And now you can click and make your edits sort of real time and visually right on what you're working with. So you can do pretty much the same thing in the panel itself, or you can do it live. Okay, let's go ahead and change to radial. So again, you can make your edits in the panel, or you can do so live. Okay, so you can you have lots of options for working with gradients. Let's talk about the Freeform gradient tool, and we will begin by first selecting an object. This object has a border and a fill, and at this time I'm working with this color group here, logo 3. And you can see here's our background color, this yellow. Now I'm going to go to the gradient panel and I will select Freeform gradient. And I'm going to set to draw points, and we will have our initial point. And if you double click either right here or here in the palette itself, you can get to the colors within your swatches. And that's how you change the color. So if you want to change the spread, and you could do so down here, or the opacity, you can easily do so. I'll place this back up to 100%. Sorry, it's off the screen. You can't see that, but it was 100%. So now what we can do is continue to add points. And each point can be a different color. So you just, again, double click and choose one of your colors from your color group. All right, so it's pretty much as straightforward as clicking on the Freeform tool, gradient tool, and we are drawing with points. And each point, you can set your own color, your spread, and you can easily move the colors around. If you want to get rid of a color, I believe there's a couple of ways. I believe you can just click and press delete, or you can come down here and on the stop you have selected, just delete. And you can go ahead and delete and or add as many points as you like. All right, let's talk about the line option for the Freeform gradient tool. So I have my object selected. I'm going to go ahead and enable Freeform gradient. I have the line option selected. I'm going to begin by just creating a point and dragging to another point, clicking. Now, when I go to drag, the tool is trying to curve the line, and you may want a curved line. But if you want to keep straight line segments, we'll just go back to this point, hold the Option key for a Mac, Alt for a PC, click once, and then simply drag to another point. If you're done making points for right now, then you can just press the Escape key and the gradient tool will stop drawing points. Now, I'm going to go ahead and select this point here, which is the start of a line, and I'm just going to delete this. Okay? And then we'll go to this point, double click, select a color. We'll go to this point, double click, and select a color. And I'll leave the last one white. So now you should be able to select a point and move them. I'll go and select this point, like so. All right. And again, if you don't want the tool to continue drawing, and you don't have to connect the points again, all right, but if you don't want the tool to continue to draw, just press the Escape key. All right. So if you do want curves, then basically you should be able to delete your points. All right. So I'll just delete this one. I'll click this one, delete. So now when I click this point, I'll go ahead and click, and we'll come down to this corner and click, and now we have an arc. And I'll go ahead and press the escape key to stop creating points. And now we can go through the process of clicking on our points and adding colors. All right, so using the Freeform gradient line option to create curves or line segment based gradients. You may want to use a texture or an image within one of the elements in your logo. So I want to add a texture inside of the border. And right now I am working on Color Study 10 on Artboard 10. So I'm going to open, and then right now my logo example is a group. So I'm going to take the rectangle and remove the rectangle from the group. And there's lots of different ways to approach this, but I want the texture to be inside of this border shape. And to do so and to work with this easily, I'm just going to remove this shape from the group. Now the shape is above the group, so let's go ahead and position our shape below the group. Okay, so we now just have this rectangle that is our background and our border as its own separate element. Now, let's go ahead and go to the File menu, and we will place, and I'm going to add this background texture, and I want to make sure link is not checked. I want to keep my image embedded, so it's part of the document. Let's go ahead and place, click. I'm going to select the corner, hold the Shift key, and scale the image because the texture, the grain of it is much too large, and I want this texture to have a much finer grain. So I'm going to bring this in like so, and that's fine. But I also, maybe I want to crop this. Maybe it's a really huge image. You don't need to scale it down, but you just need a certain part of it. So you might just want to crop a certain area. So I'm going to select. I'll go ahead and collapse these two panels so I can see my properties, and we will click Crop Image. And let's just say something like this here gets the job done. All right, so we'll go ahead and click Apply, and now we have our image. I'm going to take the image and drag the image underneath my rectangle, like so. And then what we can do is we're going to use the border to capture the texture inside. But I want the border, I still want the border. So what I need to do is select my object with the border, and I'm going to copy. That way I have a copy of this, because what's going to happen is in the next step, the shape will end up being sacrificial. So we won't see it any longer. We'll just see the cropped image. So I'm going to shift click so I have rectangle and image both selected. And then from the properties, we can make a clipping mask. You could also use Command 7 or Object Clipping Mask Make. So now we have our texture inside of our object. We can always go back to Object, Clipping Mask, and Release, and make edits and change things, and then re-enable a clipping mask if so needed. All right, so now I'll go up to Object, make sure my panel is selected here, and then Edit, and we will paste in place. And this is going to bring that border and that fill color back. Okay, so I could, with this rectangle now, you'll notice the rectangle is up above the group. So I can drag this down. And just to be on the safe side, I'm going to lock my group here. And we can always take this rectangle and we can get rid of the color inside. Okay? Or what we could do is, let's put our color back. So I'll go ahead and put our color back inside. And we could, maybe I want to just put a level of transparency. So we could drop the opacity down, but you'll notice what's happening with the border here too. So we would have to paste another border back on top. All right, but let's explore this a little further. So maybe instead of opacity, what we want is to get this inside color to interact more. So I'm going to go up to the window menu and let's go down and find transparency. And now in the transparency panel, you can see we have opacity available to us. But we also have screen modes, and you can experiment with screen modes to get your objects to interact with each other in interesting ways. So maybe I'll try overlay. That's kind of interesting. And you'll notice that it's interacting with this border again. So we would need to, and maybe you like this, okay? But we could always go back and get our rectangle, all right? And we can edit, copy, edit, paste in place. Now it's going to go back up to the top. All right, so maybe we want to drag this down in the order. And this is kind of a cool effect, but and you can stack effects on top of effects, but I'm going to go ahead and tell this rectangle to no longer have overlay, but to be normal. And then we will go to the fill, and we'll set the fill to none. Okay, so let's now explore how we might do something like add a gradient inside, just to get an interesting interaction. So I'm going to go ahead and add a gradient to my rectangle here. I'm going to try this rectangle. So I want this rectangle to be selected. And let's go ahead and add a linear gradient, like so. And who knows what these have been set to, but that actually is kind of cool. So, and of course you can edit your colors. You can change the distance and the position of the ramp. So I'm just going to put this in the middle, bring my two colors a little closer to one another, just adjust that middle point, and now we get an interesting gradation over the top of our texture from one side to the other. You will need to include a color chip and a color formula for each of the colors you use in each of the logos. Now, where you place that information within the 400 by 400 pixels is entirely up to you. But I want you to keep in mind the 4 design principles while you are completing this step. All right, so I'm going to keep mine really, really simple, and I'll just use really small elements, and I'll just use them down in this corner here. Now, how you position them will depend on how many colors you're using. But remember, this entire space is yours. So you've come up with a strategy for adding the color chips. So I'm just going to use the ellipse tool, and I'm going to just hold the shift key and draw a small little dot here. Now I just happen to have this color selected, and I believe I'm working with this color group right here. Okay, so let's go ahead, and I'm just going to copy this. I'll just do a drag copy. So I'll just hold the cursor over the top, hold the Option key, begin to drag, and then hold the Shift key. Now again, the spacing and the scale and the placement, that's all up to you. All right, so I have this selected, so I could just come over here and select this color. I could also use the eyedropper tool and select. Okay, that way I know that I'm working with the colors from the same color group. Okay, now what we'll do next is actually add our formula. Once you have your color chips, you can select your color chip, and in the color panel you should be able to see the RGB and your web hexadecimal. So I want you to include the color formulas for your RGB triplets and also your web hexadecimal color formulas. So you will do this on each and every artboard to represent the colors you are using within each color exploration. Now, if you have gradients, then all you need to do is list the colors you are using in the gradient. If you are using a textured background or an image background with lots and lots of color information, don't worry about it. Just include the main colors you're using within each color exploration.